So the call goes well. You're excited about my novel, The Haunted Shovel. I've told you I'm working on the follow-up, The Haunted Pickaxe. We're going to have a great time. What's the next step? How do we proceed?
Yeah. So at that point, I would say, hey, if you have the manuscript out with any other agents, feel free to take a couple weeks to, gather responses and make your decision. That's usually the next step. Um, and then, hoping they pick me, and then we take it from there. Sign an agency agreement and start on editorial and all those good things.
So editorial, how closely are you working with a client to get that manuscript polished, and how much time are you willing to put in polishing up a manuscript?
All the time necessary. Honestly, I really love the editorial side of things. So I would call myself a very editorial agent. I work very closely with that on that with all my authors, whether they're writing picture books, middle grade, or YA. That's we're at least usually doing a couple rounds or more of revisions. Sometimes, with a YA, we might do 3, 4, even 5 back and forth. Usually, the more we do, it's getting to be kind of smaller and smaller tweaks. Sometimes I'll do the occasional line edit, on a section to kind of show the author what I'm talking about. So yeah, very editorial. I'll do as much as it takes. Yeah, I love it.
And this is after an author has written a manuscript good enough to turn your head, get your
Mm-hmm.
attention, and get representation.
Yeah.
When you're
Yeah.
doing that, are you editing specifically just to your personal preference to make the book the best it can be? Are you editing with a specific editor in mind to submit
No,
to?
no, never towards a specific editor. It would be more general, big picture type of edits, and it's not my specific preference either. So my assistant Danielle also, like, we combine our notes, so she'll give her feedback as well. So each author I work with is getting a couple sets of eyes on everything. But yeah, big picture. So if there's any plot holes, if there are pacing issues, if the character, how they're acting is all of a sudden very different than how they were before, developing characters more, making sure their motivations are clear, if there's areas where the writing's kind of choppy. So all those things I would focus on because I'm trying to make it as, polished and as strong and clear as it can be before submitting to editors because, editors, they get a lot of submissions, and so it's really important that they're seeing something that's really polished and can stand out, to them. So that's why I work so closely on that side of things.
Gotcha. When I chatted with Molly O'Neill, she said something that fascinated me,
Mm-hmm.
that she wanted to leave a little bit of revision room left for the editor she's submitting to so
Yeah.
that they can have the joy of discovering some of those things to fix.
Oh yeah. That I do that too. I think most agents probably would say they do just because you can only edit as one person, you can only edit something so much before it's like, okay, we need to pass it on, to the next person. So whoever that editor is going to be that loves the project, where they're going to go more into kind of the nitty gritty things, where they're going to be editing at the line level. So while I might line edit a section, just to show something to the author. I don't ever line edit the whole novel. I'm not really looking for grammar and spelling unless there's a lot of it. I point that out. But yeah, there's always something that the editor is going to find too. So I'm not ever editing something to death. Basically, I guess I would say.
Has it ever happened that you got a manuscript that you got to the state you thought was perfect, and then the editor took it and said, "This is perfect. Let's go ahead and set the printing press."
Never. Never, not once. They always find something. I mean, there are times where I've gotten very short editorial letters, but more often than not, no matter how much you edit something, you'll get at least a 3, 4 page editorial letter, if not more, from an editor.
And I saw a quote from you that I wanted to ask you about. You had said something to the effect that you wanted to make an author's book sometimes more marketable while maintaining their artistic vision, something to that effect. How do you achieve that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where I said that. I've So I'm never really, when I'm editing something, I'm not thinking, hey, this is what we have to do to make it more marketable. It's more, like I said, big picture stuff. I never would do anything to sacrifice an author's artistic vision. So I always like to tell the author when I'm sending editorial notes, hey, remember, this is one person's opinion. There are some things here that you might not want to edit. You might be like, I want to keep this as is, or I want to try this direction instead of that direction. Like, it's very much an open conversation. I'm never going to tell an author that they need to edit something in this particular way. I would never do that. I always say to them, this is your book. This is your baby. You have to follow the feedback that resonates with you and feels true to your vision for the story. As far as the marketing potential of a book, I'm always thinking about that when I'm considering taking on someone as a new client. Of course, I'm like, hey, I love this book, and this is in this genre that's really working well right now. That's cool. That's an added bonus. But I'm more so looking for a writer whose work I'm just passionate about. I can't imagine not working on it. I love the story. I love the writing, the voice, whatever, all those things. I think about that much more than I think about this is going to be a big bestseller or this is going to go to auction. I mean, that's great when those things happen. But to me, it's more important to have that passion for the project. And then once I'm working with an author, after the first book, we'll have the conversation, hey, what should we work on next? So the marketing side of things, the market side of things, come into play more there, where an author will be like, hey, I have this idea and this idea. What do you think might fit better in the market right now? And I'll give, my advice as far as that goes. But yeah, it's more at those phases that I'm thinking about those things versus when I'm actually editing it.
Gotcha. So some follow-up questions about every one of those steps. Mm-hmm. Starting with, we go to the big-time editor that comes back and says, hey, we love this story, but we want the haunted shovel to be a haunted spade. And I freak out and say, my God, no. I based this on my grandmother's shovel. It means everything to me. I can't make that change. How do you negotiate a pitfall like that?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, most editors, when they take on a project too, they say the same thing that I just said, where they're like, hey, this is still your book. I'm going to guide you in certain directions, but I never want you to say yes to something you're not comfortable with. And, that's always worked out. And if it's something a more major plot line that the author's not sure of, usually I'll set up a call so they can actually talk with the editor, and I'll be on the call too. And we'll do a little bit of brainstorming to figure out maybe a nice middle ground that makes everyone happy. So that's how I would tackle that when that does happen.
Gotcha. And I'm sure this never happens. But in the event that for some reason all of foolish New York publishing doesn't recognize the brilliance of my haunted shovel novel, and we do our best and we submit to everybody that it's a good fit for, and it just doesn't happen, what do we do then?
Yeah, and that happens too, even when as a debut, and even with someone who has a track record and has published books, where there'll be a book that you go out with and it just for whatever reason doesn't get traction. And it could be for a lot of reasons. It could be that specific editor has a book that's a little too similar. It's in a genre that just editors aren't buying as much of it right now. So yeah, those things happen, and it's always a conversation with the author where I'll be like, hey, I've sent this out very widely. We don't really have many options left. I think it might be best to, crack out that next book and make that the best it can be and go out with that project. So you'll hear from a lot of, authors that they'd written, a few books or several books even before they had that book that, actually sold and became published. So that's not unusual at all for the first one or even the first few to not sell, because there's just so many factors that go into it.